What is overlaid upon these four varieties is our Alltech biofertilizer study. And so we're looking at, again, soil set and grain set, and then the combination of soil set and grain set on these plants and testing to see if they impact cannabinoid levels and also terpene levels. I don't know how many people are familiar with a lot of the extracts coming out, but people are interested in whole spectrum plant extracts. They want a whole range of cannabinoids, including, you know, as much of that little bit of 0.3% THC or less that they can get in there, right? As well as the terpenoids. And there's some evidence, so we need to do more research on it, that terpenoids act synergistically with cannabinoids, and any of these purported health benefits, and you really got to be careful calling it any kind of medicine or anything. You can't, FDA hasn't approved any of this stuff. So it's a dietary supplement, but the purported health benefits are supposedly in part due to some of the synergistic interactions between cannabinoids and terpenoids. I'm not a doctor. Well, I'm a soil scientist, but I'm not a medical doctor, so don't take any of that as medical advice, right? So, you know, you guys can feel free to take a look here. You can see these are all female flowers if I've done my job well. There might be a few seeds in here. Not many though, and it's especially gratifying knowing that we don't have a whole lot of seed, because just down the hill we've got fiber and grain. But we think we were kind of smart the way we did it. We're upwind as far as the prevailing winds. We're uphill. You can see we're not really trying to hide anything with the corn here. We're trying to keep the pollen from down there coming up here, and on the other side of those plots down there, the upward side, we have a row of sorghum, also serving as a windbreak. And so we think that's done a reasonable job at preventing pollen exchange between our cannabinoid varieties and our fiber varieties. It's probably not perfect.
What about bees?
What's that?
What about bees?
It's a wind-pollinated crop. It's a good question. Bees do seem to like.
They're on the males. They're
Yeah. They seem to like the cannabis plant. And in fact, Dr. Tom Webster, he is our bee specialist here, and he's been interested in looking more closely at that.
but they don't seem to pollinate the, obviously.
I haven't tried to quantify it, right? But you know, if you look and dig in here, don't dig too deep, because these are, you know, we need these plants. But you're not seeing a whole lot of seeds in here, right? I can break a flower off. There goes that yield specimen, and you can pass it around. You won't see too many seeds in there. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to shoot me some questions on the research itself, on what we've seen with cannabinoid production right here up front.
So, what kind of soil is considered good for growing this crop?
These are, they're either Maury or McAfee soils. It's a good silt loam. I think the key in your soil is it's got to be well drained.
Okay.
Hemp does not like soil that stays wet. Later in the summer, we haven't had that problem. You know, last year we had a very wet summer, and I know a lot of people had a lot of moisture-induced problems in their hemp.
So, in terms of responses to nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium fertilizer, so what do you think? Which
Anytime that you're asking about those kinds of specific issues, I'm going to recommend that you take soil samples, and I'm a soil scientist by training. I've been trained to say this. Take soil samples, send them to a soil testing lab, and see where your soil stands. Because even if your soil is, you know, on paper a good soil, if it has not been managed well, you need to know the impacts of that management and the different nutrient levels. Of course, nitrogen is the most limiting, and you know, you're going to manage that through your hopefully organic inputs like cover crops or manures or composts, right? But anytime you want to get you're asking a question about soil fertility, get your soil tested.
Do they have the data?
Yeah.
Do they have the people who interpret those have the data to tell you if this particular amount, this particular nutrients that you've got are beneficial for?
If you get, so for example, I use University of Kentucky's regulatory services, and frankly, Frank Sikora over there is really good. They put recommendations on the results that you get back. So you'll either be optimum or
For hemp.
moderate. Well, not for hemp. Right now they're not putting hemp recommendations. So right now it's still things like corn,
Right.
soybeans, alfalfa, silage, tobacco, whatever.
So
right?
that data is not out.
Hemp, to my knowledge, is not on there yet. But you know, I mean, ballpark 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre, and then you know, following recommendations for a grain crop like corn is not going to be a bad thing for you.
Are you testing for that also? Is that in your data set?
We're soil testing down in the fiber and grain,
Not here though.
but not up here. No. No. I only have so much staff.
What's the yield per plant?
I mean, so the yield per plant is going to depend on, you know, how early or late you got them in. This is a photoperiod dependent plant, and so it's going to flower once that day length reaches a certain point. If you get them in earlier, you're generating more biomass during vegetative, and all that vegetative material will then turn into material that produces flowers, right? So it's dependent on the variety, it's dependent on your management, it's dependent on how early or late you get it in. But, you know, the plants that you'll see later that Tony and I are working on through the co-op, we're hoping to get 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per plant for some of these plants. These are probably less than 1 pound because they were planted a little later. So, you know, when we go over to beyond the bridge, you'll see the difference in biomass. And a lot of that is a function of how early it was planted over there.
How are you drawing them out?
We're going to dry them out, and this is tricky. I mean, different people are using different. There are ovens out there now that you can run them through that are like a conveyor style oven, and it'll only take a couple hours to dry your plants out. A lot of people are hanging them in barns. We're planning on, and Tony will talk about this, converting some of the high tunnels into drying facilities that he has, covering them with shade cloth to prevent light deterioration of the cannabinoids, and hanging them with fans pushing air through the high tunnel. It's a key to keep air moving, because if you don't have that air, you're going to have mold, and you don't want mold. So you want to dry them down to about 12% moisture, and at that point and below, you don't tend to have the mold issues.
Is anybody doing grain bins?
Chad Rosen is Victory Hemp Foods, and they're doing grain bins for their grain crop. Now, I don't know specifically if people are trying to dry flowers in the grain bins. I haven't explored that.
How do you take care of these guys?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? You know, so that's probably the corn earworm, or. But yeah, we're right now we're hoping to get spinosad or BT on label, and that was the question that Tony was asking in there, right? And right now, if you want to just throw them on the ground and step on them, that'll be fine with me.
What about diatomaceous earth?
I don't know where, I need to go back and look at what KDA has on their website for diatomaceous earth. Anything that you're putting on it needs to be, that question needs to be asked of KDA. This, again, the problem is there's really nothing on label for use in hemp. And if you're putting that on there, that's why I keep telling people they should think about organic, because we're really kind of all growing organic by default right now. And if you're not certified, you're losing out on an opportunity.
Are these plants grown from clones or seeds?
These came in from seed. And so each variety we started in our greenhouse down here. You can just kind of see the top of the greenhouse if you're up the hill high enough to see over the corn, I guess. But we started them in the greenhouse and transplanted them out here. This was all hand planted. My staff and I came in and did it on about 3.5 foot spacing, because we knew we were going to take out male plants. So yeah, these came in from seed, and we culled all the males.
When did you plant? Do you remember?
Depends on the variety. I'd have to go back and look at the exact dates, but most of these went in last week of July through the maybe last week of June through the third week of July. And so they were coming in from, again, transplants that had already had a little bit of a start before they were in. So.
How many total plants are in these couple test plots?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I would say we probably have, I don't know, eyeballing it, 150, 200 plants here.
Okay.
Yeah. This is small. I mean, this
That's
is
kind of what we're.
about a quarter acre, maybe.
Okay.
Well, what rate what percent of the plants were female, and how many were male? Was it around 50%? Were they?
It seemed
regular
like it was
seeds?
around 50. I mean, we didn't really quantify it. We were busy trying to just get the darn males out,
I
and
understand.
we didn't take exact numbers on that. But it seemed like a 50-50 split. Yeah.
So who's processing it for the oil?
This is all research, so unfortunately we don't
I'll
process
process your stuff into oil.
it. We don't process it. We're in the business of processing data, right? And to me, it's a big shame. But if we start selling this stuff off farm, that represents a lot of potential conflict.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, not for you guys, but like, besides that guy.
Yeah.
Who in the
So,
state?
I mean, there are some processors in the area. I mean, Zelios is a big one over in Lexington. I haven't worked personally with Zelios on anything other than having some conversations about what they do. I would recommend or not recommend anybody because I haven't really, on the processing side, and in my university capacity, I haven't really worked with any of the processors because, again, we're just collecting the data off these. We're real interested in looking at the CBD and THC ratio and the other cannabinoids and terpenoids in it. And then we'll probably save these samples for posterity, some of them, and the rest of them will probably, I hate to say it, but it'll get composted.
What are you looking for in the flowers when you're harvesting, when they're ready to harvest?
What are we looking for in the flower when
Like
they're ready to
what are you
harvest?
looking for when you're ready to harvest the plant? Like what's the
So what I'm recommending to people is that, especially if they're working with varieties that are potentially varieties of concern, and some of the ones here are, they will push that THC 0.3%. Generally speaking, the longer the plant is in the field and the flowering, it will get closer to that 0.3% THC. And so you need to monitor that. And a lot of people that are growing now are taking periodic samples as they progress through the flowering cycle and sending them to testing labs. And so what we're doing, between Tony and I, we aren't doing this here at Kentucky State. We're going to take a sample at the end. But what Tony and I have been doing at Beyond the Bridge and other producers are doing is they're basically trying to mimic the Kentucky Department of Ag sampling protocol and sending these flowers to a couple of the testing services here in the state. And so what Kentucky Department of Ag does is they come out and they take the top 6 to 8 inches off of 5 randomly selected plants. They pull them all together in one bag. That all gets ground up, extracted, and tested at the testing facility. So that gets you a good average. You don't want to take one plant at a time, because if you happen to get that one plant that could be spiking, that plant would be averaged out if you put it in a bag full of 5 plants. So you want the field average. You don't want individual samples.
Hey, Sean, question as far as, like, with you at the university, you're able to have 4 different strands out here that you're able to experiment and see, hey, this one does really well in my dirt. Like my landscape's in the hills as opposed to flat. But as a farmer, I'm not going to be able to have that ability with the license so instead of buying like 1,000 seeds from a distributor to grow that one strand, I want to see what really is going to do well in my dirt and my farm, but I don't have the capability, do I, to do a patch of this, a patch of that,
I wasn't aware that KDA
without getting a
limits.
different license for each one of those
They
little
don't limit
patches.
it.
No,
No,
not limited.
you can have
You
more
have to
than,
mark it on your map.
yeah,
and
you can
find
have more than
different
one
strains in the
variety
same
on your
lot.
permit. for
So,
sure.
so I'm not limited that way, so
Yeah.
I can experiment and see what's going to do
Yeah.
For
good
sure.
in my dirt.
And I'm
Okay.
working with a couple of farmers that have more than one variety, and they're doing
Okay.
exactly what you're talking about.
Gotcha.
And that's wise, because everybody's dirt's different.
Oh yeah,
Right.
So
and all these varieties are different.
That's right.
So yeah.
The
So-
all-tech products that you're using, what's the difference between the two of them?
One is formulated. They're both made to help natural nutrient cycling. One is more of a foliar applicant that is engineered, and I don't know the proprietary specs for each product, but one is supposed to be foliar applied and absorbed through the leaf material, right? The other is a soil applied, and it is meant to specifically stimulate enzyme activity in microorganisms to help speed up. And we have actually done some work with that showed that it increased urease activity in the soil, which is a nitrogen processing enzyme.
Very similar to the side dressing on soybeans.
Chuck, can you speak to that more specifically? Chuck is I'll put Chuck on the spot. Chuck McKenna is from Alltech, and maybe he can give us a little bit of insight on the specific formulations.
Thanks for the question. On the soil set, what it is, it's like Dr. Lucas says, the enzymes stimulate various processes in the soil. But what the soil set is made from bacterial fermentation. So what happens is that the good bacteria it takes care of the bad pathogens in the soil. So when you put that down, it helps replace those. The other thing it does, it also works on crop residue. So if you have whatever crop was in the ground the year before, it helps break that down, makes those nutrients available. So you have a higher mineral content and a higher fertilizer content available to that crop. So that's how the soil set works. And the grain set is a foliar applied product. It goes into the leaf surface, and what it does, it stimulates especially auxin production in the plant. And auxin production is responsible for root development. So if you've got a better root system, it's going to withstand a lot of stresses and problems down the road.
Okay. Now that would also, the soil set would probably help if you were using a farm-based animal waste product to help break that
Sure.
down as well.
It's a good complementary product for anything you're using.
Okay. Specifically, maybe chicken litter, whether it be rice hulls or wood chip.
That work
It
great.
help break that down.
That help breaks it down, right. The enzymes help break that down and make it more available to the plant. It also helps, it's all about the soil health and the plant health. And all of our products are OMRI certified.
When it comes to foliar versus and soil application, which one have you found a greater success with when you're studying it, or is this the first time it's been studied at this level?
It's the first time it's been studied.
We found the most success in fiber and grain on the combination. And so we actually put soil set on the ground at the time of seeding, and then came back with grain set about 2 weeks after emergence, and then developing a couple of sets of full leaves. And we saw significant increases with both biomass and grain production, depending on the year. One year was a little iffier than the other, but depending on the year, we saw significant, I should clarify that, a little iffier than, one year was iffier than the other in terms of grain production and grain yield, but both years that we did the study with Alltech on our fiber and grain, on our grain crop, we saw significant increases in biomass with the combination of soil set and grain set. 2 minutes, all right. One more question. Yes, sir, right up front.
You said, you keep saying the word biomass, and then you also said that you wanted us to compare the biomass that you would get from this plant to another plant that you're going to show us. Can you describe what you mean in that plant?
Well, biomass is basically the entirety of the plant, the whole plant. Now, in hemp terms, you'll hear people talking about harvesting biomass and processing biomass, and what they're doing is taking, this material, the floral material, and milling it, and then having the material extracted. So that's what you hear about it.
So then, what other plant you're going to show us next is going to be have more flower to it or something?
Well, so these are for cannabinoid production. Okay. Where you guys are going next is for fiber and grain, and they're actually, the grain plants are tiny.
Okay, yeah.
They're about 3 foot tall, and they get one big flower on the top.
Yeah.
Whereas these are very bushy plants.
Okay, yeah.
So these probably have overall more biomass. Biomass just means overall plant material.
Gotcha. Okay, appreciate it.
It's just very interesting that, I don't know whether it makes a difference or not, but they have consistent gradients to them, where some of them on other locations are starting to brown or yellow, and with the green, does that make a big difference, or especially with whether it gets hot or not?
some of it is just a function of when they were planted. I mean, so I'm working with the same varieties over at Tony's Silver Nails Farm that you guys will see, and those have been flowering as by day length. They should have been flowering at the same time, but these actually flowered a little bit later, probably because we got them in a little bit later, and so they're not quite as progressed. As the plants flower and they go through that life cycle and come to near the end of their life cycle, they start dropping leaves and yellowing, and all these white hairs will turn brown, or kind of a golden red actually, and that's just part of the natural process.
Weeding. Did you by hand weeding or
Graduate students. Graduate students and staff here. Now, Tony will tell you we put a lot of work in with the BCS over at Beyond the Bridge. But that's a walk-behind tractor. So we were using a walk-behind tractor in between rows, and we did a fair bit of hand labor within the row until the canopy got established. But once the canopy gets established, then you're doing all right.
Is there any?
Last question. I think I got to turn you loose because Jenny is going to corral you one way or the other over
Okay,
here.
as far as land preparation, just for planting, what you guys did from the greenhouse to here, did you plow, disc, till?
So we disked this field, and so this is a field that we work regularly. It came out of cover crop that we had planted in the fall, and then in the
So
spring,
did you turn the cover
yeah,
crop
we just disked it a couple of times, and we actually have a rototiller that we did a very light tillage. I mean, we're organic, and so you need to till to control the weeds, right? But we try to keep that to a minimum because we do value our organic matter. So we disked it, and we just gave it a light rototilling for finishing. And then actually we have a bed shaper, and you can't really, well, you can see. I mean, we came through here with a bed shaper to try and make the mounds that we were going to plant in.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks.
All right, if you guys do have more questions, feel free to email me. If you don't get my card by the end of the day, you can look me up on KSU's website. Not too hard to find. And then we're going to swap. You guys are going to go down behind the black barn and talk with Blake and Kimberly about our organic hemp rotations project. Thank you all for coming out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.